Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 5, cover dated October of 1963. The issue was written by Stan Lee, drawn by Steve Ditko, and lettered by Sam Rosen. Our issue opens up with a striking splash page that teases Spider-Man's coming confrontation with Dr. Doom, arch-nemesis of the Fantastic Four. Also teased is the super team itself and the roster of supporting characters that flesh out Peter Parker's personal life. But now the story truly begins, as we see a television screen broadcasting one of the few films of Spider-Man in action. A voice over the broadcast explains that the purpose of the program is to uncover the true identity and motives of the masked hero. Of course, this voice is none other than Jonah Jameson, publisher of the Daily Bugle newspaper and Spider-Man's most vocal critic. As usual, he uses his media empire as a platform to decry his hatred of Spider-Man and vows to expose the so-called hero for the menace he really is. Luckily, not everybody believes in Jameson's lies, as we see Flash Thompson, classmate and bully to Peter Parker, declare his admiration for the wall-crawler. Him and several classmates, including Peter, are at a bowling alley, idly listening to the broadcast. Of course, none of them suspect a nerd like Peter could be Spider-Man, but the clever teenager decides to distance himself from his secret identity as much as he can, and vocally agrees with Jameson's sentiment. The remark gains him the further ire of Flash, who chastises Peter and tells him to get lost. The embittered teen does just that, hiding his anger and restraining himself from challenging the jock like he did in the last issue, which only made him the target of more mockery. With that, the issue shifts focus to another part of town, as we see a mysterious metal-clad figure listen to Jameson's broadcast, as the publisher announces a $1,000 reward for anyone who can disclose Spider-Man's identity. Thus an idea starts to form in the mind of an evil genius, for the mysterious figure is Dr. Doom, arch-nemesis of the Fantastic Four. The villain recalls his narrow defeats at the hands of the super team, and realizes that with the strength of Spider-Man at his side, he would be unstoppable. He specifically recalls the ending of Fantastic Four issue 17, where we had last seen Dr. Doom jump from his floating laboratory to escape capture. While the Fantastic Four didn't know their enemy's fate, it's revealed that he activated a jet-powered flying belt that glided him to safety and to the lair which he now resides. It's here that he prepares to hatch his newest evil scheme, deciding like the chameleon before him to contact Spider-Man using a special frequency that only spider senses can hear. Peter Parker receives the message while he's at home experimenting with his web shooters. In the message, Dr. Doom calls for Spider-Man, yet doesn't reveal his identity nor location. Peter is thus left to wonder who had sent him the message, but he needn't wonder from where, as his spider senses can also track the source of the transmission. Thus Peter Parker suits up as Spider-Man and heads out to confront this mystery figure. Arriving at Dr. Doom's lair, Spider-Man immediately recognizes the infamous villain. Yet the menace's terrifying reputation doesn't scare our hero, as he brazenly enters the lair and demands to know why he's been contacted. Dr. Doom plainly lies out his offer. Join him, and together they can rule the world. Yet the mad scientist is more subtle than that, as he tries to appeal to Spider-Man's sense of pride and envy by questioning why he is shunned and persecuted by the world, while heroes like the Fantastic Four bask in public praise. It's also at this moment that Dr. Doom silently reveals his true plans for Spider-Man, as once the hero has fulfilled his purpose, he will be squashed as easily as his namesake. But now it's Spider-Man's turn to speak, as he ponders the offer, only to deliver a resounding no. Dr. Doom warns Spider-Man that he isn't one to be trifled with, but the hero's opinion is resolute, as he'd never team up with such an evil menace. Thus Spider-Man takes the opportunity to subdue Doom, as he suddenly encases him in an inescapable web net. But the villain is an evil genius like no other, and had foreseen such an outcome. It's revealed that the Dr. Doom Spider-Man had been talking to this whole time was nothing but a robotic duplicate, as the real Doom emerges from a hidden doorway to vanquish Spider-Man. First he activates a hidden trapdoor underneath the spot the hero's standing. Yet Spider-Man's reflexes are beyond some funhouse trick, as he easily avoids a fall and lunges at Dr. Doom. But the villain is an expert fighter, who catches his foe and hurls him away. Spider-Man recovers just in time to avoid an energy blast from one of Dr. Doom's metallic fingers. Yet the dodge forces the hero out of a nearby window and into a body of water, which he uses as cover to fully escape. Despite this exit, Dr. Doom still has plans for Spider-Man, with his first priority now being the uncovering of the hero's real identity. Yet Spider-Man had not truly fled, he had only hid long enough to strike back at Dr. Doom with the element of surprise. But just as the hero prepares to re-enter the villain's lair, it blows up in a fiery explosion. Spider-Man is unharmed, but nonetheless frustrated at how easily Dr. Doom got away. Regardless, the wall crawler takes a few photographs of the burning building and rushes back home. Yet not before a group of street-goers see him leave from the direction of the fire and assume he was the one behind it. The issue then shifts forward a day and into the office of Jonah Jameson, who agrees to buy Peter's photos of the lair, but challenges the young photographer to capture stills of Spider-Man, as he wants to blame its explosion on the hero. Thus for the first time Peter speaks up against the publisher, albeit indirectly, as he tells Jameson that people are beginning to think his obsession with Spider-Man is going too far. Unexpectedly, Jameson's secretary Betty Brandt speaks up and agrees with Peter, even saying that some of their readers think the publisher is jealous of the hero. Peter is glad to finally have an ally in Betty, who he realizes is actually quite beautiful, perhaps hinting at things to come. As for the publisher himself, he unsurprisingly disregards the two's warnings, declares that his only motivation is money, and that Spider-Man sells. The issue then shifts focus to another part of town, where we see what looks like Spider-Man showing off his costume to a group of teenagers. Yet of course this isn't actually the wall crawler, but Flash Thompson, dressed in a somewhat ill-fitting knockoff suit, which he plans to use on a prank against Peter Parker. But before we can see Flash's prank play out, the issue now shifts focus to another lair of Dr. Doom's, where the evil scientist has constructed a device capable of picking up spider impulses, like a Geiger counter does radiation. Thus the villain heads off to his personal helicopter, from which he will scour the city to find Spider-Man. Eventually Doom wanders into Peter's neighborhood, just as the young photographer is walking home from Jameson's office. Yet lurking in the shadows are two mischievous teenagers, who alert Flash Thompson of Peter's presence. The bully then hides behind a fence Peter is about to pass while wearing his full costume, including the mask. Yet it's right at this moment that Dr. Doom picks up Peter's spider impulses on his device, but of course mistakes Flash for the real Spider-Man. Thus he drops from his helicopter and blasts Flash with a torrent of fast-acting sleeping gas, which knocks out the bully. Despite all this taking place only feet away from him, Peter hears none of it, as the teenager is as usual, deep in thought. Dr. Doom then takes Flash away to his ship, not suspecting that he isn't the real Spider-Man. Although he does remark that the hero's defeat was surprisingly easy. Meanwhile the group of teenagers assembled to watch Flash's prank are left disappointed, as Peter calmly walks by them, none the wiser that a prank had even been planned. Peter then arrives at his home to find Aunt May watching television. But suddenly her show's broadcast is hijacked by none other than Dr. Doom, who finally unveils his master plan. He reveals that he's captured what he thinks to be Spider-Man and threatens to vanquish the hero unless the Fantastic Four surrender to him one by one. While Aunt May reels at the sight of Dr. Doom, she does remark that the imprisonment of Spider-Man might just be deserved, as she thinks he's as much of a menace as Doom himself. Yet Peter doesn't seem to be listening to his aunt, as he confusedly wonders who the villain has really captured. His thoughts are then interrupted by a phone call from Liz Allen, apparent girlfriend of Flash. She tells Peter that Flash is missing and was last seen in a Spider-Man costume as part of a prank, though she doesn't reveal it was supposed to be on him. But Peter tells her that there's nothing he can do about it and hangs up the phone. Realizing Dr. Doom has captured Flash, Peter lets out a sigh of relief, as he thinks the Fantastic Four would never agree to the villain's terms, and thus the bully will get what he deserves. Of course Peter's heroic half immediately kicks in and balks at the thought of letting Doom harm Flash, compelling the teenager to suit up as Spider-Man to attempt to rescue. So Peter, having been back home only a few minutes, tells his aunt he must run an errand and leave again. Yet his elderly guardian forbids him from leaving with Dr. Doom running loose in the city. If only to satiate his aunt's restless heart, Peter agrees to stay, but then immediately slinks away to the basement and pulls a fuse. With the house's power out, Peter returns to his aunt and offers to go out and get some spare fuses, which she hesitantly agrees to, although she presses him to be careful and return quickly. Peter then heads outside and changes into his costume under the cover of some bushes. The issue then shifts focus to the Baxter Building, the skyscraper headquarters of the Fantastic Four. It's there that the members of the team are questioning what they should do about Doom's ultimatum, although none seem to have a clear answer. Swinging outside is Spider-Man, who's deduced that for the villain to have hijacked the television broadcasts, his lair must be in an area of the city producing a massive amount of electricity. Luckily, the hero's spider instinct can detect electricity, so he's scouring the city until he senses an unusual amount. He travels around for a while, but finally senses a disturbance within an abandoned factory. The factory is indeed the home of Dr. Doom's lair, where the captured Flash Thompson is begging to be let go as he's not actually Spider-Man. But the mad scientist still thinks Flash is the web-slinging hero, just a cowardly one at that. Yet on the roof above, the real Spider-Man has landed. Knowing Dr. Doom has likely set up a myriad of traps at any traditional entrances, the hero enters the factory through a pipe only someone as nimble as a spider can. Arriving at Doom's hidden lair, Spider-Man makes his presence known to the now confused villain and tells him that he's captured a phony. But Doom vows to rectify his mistake and now defeat Spider-Man once and for all. The villain first resorts to his finger blasts, which Spider-Man is able to dodge and block with a web column. From behind the column, Spider-Man fashions a glob of webbing that he slings at the villain, which jams his finger gun with its sticky fluid. Yet Dr. Doom is hardly defenseless as he rushes to a nearby control panel and activates a trap above Spider-Man's head. Suddenly a torrent of liquid ice starts careening towards the hero, but he's able to craft an umbrella-like shield of webbing that prevents him from being frozen still. Dr. Doom's next attack comes from a strange weapon which begins hurling iron spheres at Spider-Man. The spheres are too fast for the wall crawler to block, so he's forced to dodge them as best he can. Yet the spheres are magnetically charged and whizzing around the room as though they have infinite momentum. Knowing he can't dodge the spheres forever, Spider-Man turns to his trusty web shooters, dives underneath the spheres, and web jams the device that's giving them their power. Yet Doom, as always, has more tricks up his sleeve and sends a torrent of fire up through the floor where Spider-Man is standing. But like earlier, the hero's reflexes are too keen for such a simple trick as he leaps onto the ceiling and out of harm's way. Yet Spider-Man has actually fallen for another of Doom's traps, as the fire was only meant to force the wall crawler into a precise spot, from which a barrage of electricity begins shocking him. But the hero's web shooters never seem to let him down, as he sticks Doom with a line of webbing, which sends the electric current to the villain and forces him to shut off the trap. Spider-Man finally thinks he's exhausted the last of Doom's tricks and confidently declares it's time to battle man-to-man. Yet of course this isn't true, as Spider-Man suddenly finds himself grappled from behind. It's the robotic duplicate from earlier, who's struggling to hold Spider-Man still, as the real Dr. Doom positions a disintegration beam to destroy the hero. But Spider-Man's strength is beyond that of the duplicate as he breaks free of its grasp and chucks it at Doom. While the villain is staggered, Spider-Man tries to destroy his beam by hurling at it a nearby unfinished satellite. Yet the beam is more powerful than Spider-Man expected, as it effortlessly disintegrates the satellite. Spider-Man begins dodging the beam as best he can, but a recovered Dr. Doom then lunges at him to finish their fight. Grabbing hold of Spider-Man in an iron grip, the villain pushes the hero closer and closer to the weapon's main disintegration beam. Only an inch away from an early grave, Spider-Man musters the last of his strength to shove off his foe, which sends both him and the villain crashing into a control panel that shuts off the beam. Yet with that, Spider-Man is exhausted and susceptible to a mighty blow to the face. The hero recovers quickly, but not before Dr. Doom releases a flurry of intensely bright sparkling flakes that blind him. Luckily Spider-Man can still maneuver with his spider sense and dodges several strikes as his eyes clear. But the hero then slips on an iron sphere from earlier, priming Doom to deliver a finishing blow. But in a stroke of luck, Spider-Man is saved by the sudden arrival of the Fantastic Four, as Dr. Doom knows he can't face off against the super team and Spider-Man at the same time. So he ceases fighting with the wall crawler and hastily flees to a getaway exit. Spider-Man's eyes then fully clear as the Fantastic Four prepare to land on the abandoned factory, but as much as he'd like to greet the super team, he suddenly remembers his Aunt May, who's probably worried sick at his long absence. So Spider-Man rushes home. But back in Doom's lair, Flash has been freed and begins wandering through the abandoned factory looking for a way out. It's then that he runs into the Fantastic Four, but the Human Torch, having closely encountered the real Spider-Man in issue 3, immediately recognizes Flash as a phony. Back across town, Peter arrives at his home in his civilian attire, but only to find an empty house. The teenager's head starts racing with worry, but Aunt May appears on the porch and tells him that she had simply gone to stay with the next-door neighbor while he was out. She then asks Peter if he has the spare fuses, which of course he doesn't. He opts to tell her that he was too afraid to walk the streets alone at night. Yet we don't get to see if Aunt May accepts the excuse, as the issue once again shifts forward a day and into the office of Jonah Jameson. There the publisher rebukes Peter for failing to capture any photographs of Dr. Doom's battle with Spider-Man, quite an outrageous expectation. Interestingly, Betty Brant speaks up for Peter and says she thinks he's wonderful. But the issue then shifts forward another day, and now to Peter's school, where the love-unlucky teenager thinks about Betty's comment and realizes he might just have feelings for her. The issue subsequently ends as Flash proudly recounts the events of his kidnapping as if he were the hero. A group of his friends gobble up the story without hesitation, just the kind of luck Peter now expects from his dual life. Well, that concludes our story for today. Marvel has appended 2 letter pages at the end of this issue. For those unaware, letter pages were once hallmarks of the comic industry in an age before the internet. They gave Marvel an opportunity to respond to the praise, criticism, and suggestions they'd received about their stories. All of the letters presented in this issue were sent by mail to Marvel almost 60 years ago and cover Amazing Spider-Man issue 3. While I will not be reading the letter pages aloud, please take a moment to look and see what readers of the time thought of this series. It's certainly an interesting experience all these years later. And with that, we've concluded Amazing Spider-Man issue 5 and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was another solid story from Marvel. In all honesty, I didn't expect much from this issue going into it. It's the first in the series that doesn't introduce a Spider-Man-specific villain that has gone on to become iconic. Yet I thought Dr. Doom was the most menacing villain yet. Perhaps his reputation precedes him, but I felt that Doom's evil scheme was the most believable yet. Take for example issue 3, which I still think is a great issue, but looking at it more critically, Dr. Octopus's evil scheme was pretty unclear and confusing. The issue never really explains what his plans are beyond invading an atomic research center. In contrast, Doom's scheme made sense, tied well with Peter's personal life, and had an obvious endpoint. While Dr. Doom will only make sporadic appearances in the coming issues, I am definitely excited to see him pop up more in Fantastic Four and other titles where he guest stars. With that being said, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.